In Chapter 10, we talk about the presidency. No nation in the world had an elected head of state at the time the U.S. Constitution was written, so no model was available to review. After much debate over strong versus weak executives, the delegates created a presidential position with enough power to balance those of Congress. Who can become president? First, the president receives a salary of $400,000 plus $169,000 for expenses and many free services. The Constitution states the qualifications. The two major limitations involve being at least 35 years old and being a natural born citizen. And you also have to reside in the U.S. for 14 years. While these minimal requirements would seem to allow most people the opportunity to run, only a few individuals have had a realistic chance. A clear pattern evolves when reviewing a list of U.S. presidents. All have been male until Barack Obama. All have been white. All have been president except one. All have been Protestant except one, John F. Kennedy, and the average age has been 54. How do you become president? Well, the voters do not elect a president directly. Instead, they vote for electors who actually vote for president and vice president. And since most states choose electors through a plurality system, a candidate can lose the popular vote but still win the election, which has occurred 4 times, most recently in 2000 when George W. Bush beat Al Gore. The 12th Amendment in 1804, in the process of becoming president, that amendment requires that the president and vice president be chosen separately. Over time, the institution of presidency has evolved into a complex network of often conflicting roles to be played by one person simultaneously. The president acts within at least 5 constitutional roles. 1. Handling ceremonial duties. 2. Administering laws. 3. Directing the military. 4. Setting foreign policy. And 5. Getting legislation passed. One of the roles of president is head of state. That's a status of symbolic royalty requiring largely ceremonial duties. In most countries, this role is handled not by the leader of government, but as a separate position. The president also functions as the chief executive, the leader of government who is required by the Constitution to enforce the acts of Congress, judgments of federal courts, and provisions of U.S. treaties. The president heads the federal bureaucracy made up of 2 million civilian employees. Most are civil service jobs based on merit. Others are based on appointment power, high-ranking government positions filled by the president. The political appointments really add up to only about 8,000 positions, which mean the vast majority of federal employees owe no allegiance to the president. The president also has the power to grant reprieve. That's a formal postponement of execution of a sentence imposed by the court. Formal postponement. Or a pardon. That's a release from punishment or legal consequences related to a crime. So the difference between reprieve and pardon: reprieve is a formal postponement of the sentence. The pardon, release from punishment or legal consequences related to a crime. The president's also commander-in-chief, has control of the armed forces. Founders had George Washington in mind when they assigned military control to the president as commander-in-chief. This role has arguably exercised more power than any other. Modern presidents do not lead troops into battle or into combat, but they do wield ultimate military power, especially seen in wartime. The War Powers Resolution, that strengthens congressional control over sending troops into combat. War Powers Resolution requires that the president consult with Congress before sending troops into action, report such action within 48 hours, and withdraw the troops if Congress does not approve. As chief diplomat, President dominates U.S. foreign policy and sets its direction. This includes making treaties, making special agreements with other heads of state, and nominating ambassadors. With diplomatic recognition, the President determines which governments the United States will recognize or refuse to recognize as legitimate due to the responsibility of diplomatic recognition. The President also has the sole power to negotiate treaties with other nations, but a two-thirds vote in the Senate is required for approval. Even if the Senate ratifies a treaty, it will not be valid unless the President approves this version. The President also can make international agreements with the heads of foreign governments. These executive agreements do not require the approval of the Senate, though the House may deny the funds to enact them, and they do not bind future presidents as treaties do. Their power is in their immediacy when a crisis looms, and the secrecy when the interests of the American people or the President are at stake. The President also serves as the chief legislator, plays a major role in shaping the congressional agenda. Every year since 1913, the President has given the State of the Union message in a formal address to Congress, and that outlines the broad legislative agenda for Congress to accomplish. The President also relies on the power of persuasion to convince Congress to pass favored proposals. If the President is from the party in control, it'll be easier to get Congress to consider the legislative agenda. If Congress decides to ignore the President's agenda and pursue its own legislation, the President may attempt to stop legislation by use of the veto message, formal explanation of opposition. The Constitution requires that the President must act on every bill by choosing one of several options. 1, signing the bill into law. 2, allowing the bill to become law without a signature by holding it for more than 10 days. 3, rejecting the bill with a veto message to Congress. Or 4, killing the bill by holding it for more than 10 days, during which Congress adjourns. That's called a pocket veto. Line item veto. President Reagan was the first to push for the line item veto. In 1996, Congress passed the Line Item Veto Act, which allows the President to review a piece of legislation and oppose only certain issues in it without rejecting the entire bill. When the President vetoes a bill, it's possible for Congress to override that veto, but a two-thirds vote in both chambers is required. As a result, only about 7% of vetoes have been overridden. Signing statements. When signing a bill into law, the President may add a written declaration with personal commentaries. These signing statements might give specific directions for administration, state objections to certain parts of the law, express concern about its constitutionality, or just add purely rhetorical comments. All of the powers we just talked about are constitutional powers. Other powers that Congress has bestowed on the President are called statutory powers. Both kinds are express powers because they are expressly written into the Constitution or into law. But presidents also have inherent powers, those that are needed to fulfill official duties as prescribed in the Constitution, as taking care that laws will be faithfully executed. The Constitution does not mention any role for presidents regarding political parties. Today, the presidents indeed are the leaders of their party. The president chooses the party's national committee chair and disciplines those who fail to support party policies. Presidents have historically used patronage. That's rewarding loyal followers with jobs or contracts, though its effectiveness has really decreased with civil service starting in the 1880s. Increasingly, the president's most influential role has been the primary fundraiser for the party. Presidents, like all politicians, worry about their constituencies and their approval ratings. The president serves many constituencies, including the general public, even non-voters, and the supporters of the president's party. The Washington community has become an important constituency that monitors the president's power and influence on a daily basis. How much success the president has is at least partly influenced by public support or lack of it. But keeping high approval ratings as measured by national polls is very difficult for a president. Presidents have increasingly leaned towards speaking to the public rather than the Congress, and you see this a lot from President Obama. When they need congressional approval for an idea, they sometimes take their case directly to the people. This practice of going public is an attempt to generate popular support for a proposal, so it will receive less resistance from legislators.